Let's begin. For all the silver lining of the pandemic, I do miss being together in person, but I am happy for the uh, the increasing accessibility of the online classes. We have we've been lucky to enjoy both, actually. Those of you who've been coming for quite a while. So just to double check that you can hear me fine, give me a thumbs up, please. Thank you, everybody. My name is Trudy. I'm the founding teacher here at InsightLA. We have a very increasingly large and varied group of teachers here, all of whom, each teacher has their own take on the teachings and their own being through which the teachings come. But I can really say that all of our teachers are not just well-intentioned, but well-informed and I think pretty good at what they do. So I'm just the original one. That's all I am. And what we do here at the Sunday Sitting Group is we meditate for about half an hour, and we're going to do that first. Then we have some teachings and then some time for conversation together. So I want to invite you to find your comfortable sitting posture. I'm going to grab the bell, which I left in the other room. I'll be right back. And I'll do a little bit of guiding during this meditation, which I find myself doing a little more guided meditation when we're on Zoom, because Zoom by its nature, being on our computers or various devices, is more distracting. So I leave plenty of room for us to be alone together in the quiet, but we'll also be offering some suggestions, guidance and suggestions, and you can take what you like and leave the rest. And Mary and others, please be sure you're muted while we sit. Thank you. I'm going to sound the bell one more time and invite you to just listen to that sound all the way to its vanishing point. It's a beautiful way to enter the quiet. I always begin by taking a deep breath, or two or three, just to settle into the body sitting here. And just taking a moment to notice how it is for you right here in this moment of this morning, of this day. How it is in the body. What is the quality of mindfulness, of attention? And is there some tenderness, kindness, warmth, or even some joy that can be sprinkled on experience this morning, whatever it may be? And just grounding in awareness of the feet on the floor or the mat, wherever they may be, the hands in your lap, and setting the intention to relax the whole body from head to toe, breathing in the energy of aliveness of this moment, breathing out any tension, relaxing, releasing, settling into being just here, just now. And just as we breathe in the aliveness of this moment and breathe out our ability to relax into it, we're also breathing in that today is Father's Day, that this Father's Day arrives in the midst of pandemic and protest. And we're breathing in all of the unrest, all of the uncertainty, all of which is very alive right now. And maybe what we can breathe out is the willingness. No, that would be breathing in. Let's breathe out any resistance, agitation, heartache, releasing the tension, fear, worry, whatever may be obscuring the freshness and clarity of this simple moment of existence. And if you feel moved to do so, you can call to mind a moment, a memory, an image that gladdens your heart, that brings a little smile to your lips. Just offering some self soothing and loving kindness to your whole being. Just shifting the body back ever so slightly and receiving this moment, this gift of life, of breath, of our very ability to be awake, aware, and to suffuse that awareness with some tenderness, kindness, self compassion, love. And for the last 5 minutes of our sit, if you feel moved to offer some phrases of loving kindness to yourself and our world, I'll mention some that you can simply quietly repeat to yourself and listen to what you're saying, or you can ignore them as you wish. May we and all beings be safe and protected from inner and outer harm. May we live with the ease of an open heart. May we have the courage to shine the light of awareness on all the corners, illumining all the corners of our hearts and minds. May our hearts be steady through the ups and downs of life. May we be well and live with ease. May all beings be well, have a home, and live with ease. May we and all beings have the equanimity, the serenity to see clearly how things are. May we and all beings have the courage to accept the things we cannot change and the courage to change the things we can. And may we together have the wisdom and discernment to support each other in knowing the difference. So happy Father's Day to the fathers among you. And I want to share some teaching that I really love this morning, and it feels for me, it feels calming, it feels soothing during a time when so much in our world isn't. And while that's always true in the world, I think forever and ever, it feels particularly true right now in our country, following the events of the last many months, but certainly the last month especially. And so, since I feel as though uh, these teachings for me provide the best hope for our collective freedom and for freeing our hearts, and I offer what I know and love to you, and trust that you have uh, your own things that you know and love and share with those you love, just as I'm sharing with you. And I can say, even though I don't know many of you, and even the ones I know, I don't know, necessarily that much about you. But I can truly say that I do love you. And the reason for that is that I love your willingness to sit with yourselves, to have the strength and courage of heart to look deeply at the human condition as expressed in your particular life, and to respect so much. I love the eagerness and the willingness to learn about who you are, because deep down we all have, I think, and share a wish to be of some benefit in this life, that our life will have that meaning. Um, so I can say, even if it's your first time here today, and if it is, welcome to InsightLA. I can say that I love you because I respect this. Your being here tells me this much about you, and it's beautiful. And today is also the summer solstice, lest we forget. And because, for me, summer means the ocean. I mean, the ocean is with us all year round, but summer means that now, even at my advanced age, I can swim in the ocean. I used to swim in the ocean all year round with wetsuit and gloves and booties. And honestly, it's too cold now. That's the biggest difference that I notice in growing older, is sensitivity to cold. Not loss of energy yet, knock on wood, but sensitivity to cold. So I wait for summer to be able to go into the ocean. And went in last week. It was cold, but wonderful to be back in it. And I want to share a teaching that the Buddha gave about the ocean, linking the qualities of the ocean to qualities of the heart that we develop in our practice. And these are qualities that we need more than ever today, as we all face a kind of long needed awakening, painful awakening in this country to the realities of just how everything has been structured and designed to benefit those of us who identify as white. And as we begin to face all of this in our communities and look deeply at each other and ourselves and the structures within which we are functioning and doing our work, including here at InsightLA, this takes a lot of strength. It takes guts. It takes flexibility of mind and heart to look at things that we may have assumed and taken for granted and liked, actually, because they seem to serve us well. But now the people who are not being served so well are finding the support to speak up, and for us to be able to participate willingly, courageously, and lovingly in these conversations, learning to listen to each other, respect each other, and stay connected through all the feelings of disconnection. This is key. So I want to just share with you this sutta about the ocean, because it's the summer solstice as well as Father's Day. What an auspicious coincidence. For those of you who loved your fathers, the fathers in your life, and for those of you who were not blessed with a lovable father, it's still a day when you can't help but reflect on what that means in your life, what kind of father you are, and whether you have actually your own children or other people's children that you're helping to raise, we can all be a father in some way, a caregiver, caretaker of the world, of the planet, and of each other. The qualities we associate with the good enough father. So this sutra tells a very interesting story of the community of monastics practicing during the night, which they did once a month. They would practice during the night, and then they would remind themselves of the rules that they followed as a community to live harmoniously together and the training guidelines for their awakening. And so they would sit together in these different, all through the night. And then the Buddha would offer some teaching. And this night, he was about to offer the teaching, and then he stayed silent. And 3 times that happened until it was almost dawn. And the monks finally were just like, what's up? What's going on? And the Buddha said, there's somebody here who doesn't belong here, who is hiding who they really are. They're not pure-hearted. I can't teach under these conditions. And the monks together, they realized who it was. They asked that person to leave, saying, you really aren't part of this community. The person didn't want to leave. They escorted them out. And when the Buddha saw this, he said, great, this is great. After this, you guys you can recite these trainings, and you can do this yourselves, and you have the discernment to decide who's actually part of the community by right of consciousness and good intentions and sincere practice and so forth. And this is a really interesting moment when their guiding teacher steps away and says, you have the capacity to do this now. And that's, the big vote of confidence and passing on that authority to the community. I find that very uplifting. And that's what precedes these teachings about the qualities of the ocean. And I think it corresponds to very well to this time in the life of, in my life and the life of our organization and our practice. So when he says monks, he's really talking practitioners to all of us. So don't feel excluded. It's all the people who are orienting our lives to be able to do these practices together. And he's talking about the great joy that that beings take in the ocean. And there are 8 qualities that beings take great joy in about the ocean. And he's talking about all kinds of holy beings and teachers and, illumined, enlightened beings. And in the interests of time this morning, he goes through the qualities of the ocean one by one, and then goes through the qualities that these correspond to in our Dharma practice, in our mindfulness and compassion practice one by one. So I'm going to do them together. There are 8 amazing and astounding qualities of these teachings, and we can see them in these qualities of the ocean. Just as the ocean has a gradual shelf, a gradual slope, a gradual inclination, with a sudden drop off after that stretch, in the same way, our teaching is a gradual process. It's a gradual training. It's a gradual practice in the sense that it's after practicing diligently or consistently, and that doesn't mean that you never miss the day. It means that even on the days you miss, you hold your mindfulness in your heart and try to live from that place. That just as the ocean, and those of you who go in the ocean, it's true. You walk in and first you're up to your ankles, and then you're up to your knees, and then you're up to your thighs, and then you're up to it, and suddenly, boom, it's over your head. That's what happens in the practice, that we immerse ourselves, and first it's our toes, and then our ankles, and then up to our knees, and gradually until our whole being can swim in it. And this is the first amazing and astounding quality. And because we see it again and again, we take great joy in it. The second quality is that the ocean, and this may change, of course, with climate change, but in those days they were not aware of that. He talked about how the ocean stays within the bounds of the ocean, and it's stable and it doesn't overstep its tide line. There may be high tides or higher than usual tides or storms, but it comes back to essentially the same area. And he says, in the same way, those of us who are practicing do not overstep our mindfulness guidelines. We cherish all life. We tell the truth. We are, honest about what we see. We don't steal from each other. We don't misuse our sexuality to harm people. We don't get lost in addictions. And when we do, we come back to sobriety and work our program. These are the training guidelines that we as lay people embrace. And just as the ocean doesn't go, out of bounds, hopefully neither do we. Or like the ocean, when we do, because of some storm, we come back. We come back. And then the third quality of the ocean that is listed in this sutra, in this teaching, is just as the ocean doesn't tolerate a dead body, any dead body gets washed up to shore and thrown up on dry land. In the same way, if we are not truthful, if we're hidden, if we are up to no good in our lives, as that person who was sitting in the assembly and had to be asked to leave before the Buddha would teach was, if there really is no affiliation with the values of the community, even though we may all be sitting together, eventually that person will leave because the values don't fit. And then the fourth quality, I love this one, all the great rivers of the world, the Ganga, the Yamuna, all the great rivers of the world. I can't even pronounce all the rivers that are named here. On reaching the ocean, give up their former names and are simply ocean. In the same way, when all of us, members of all classes and walks of life and gender identifications and races and all the different identifications of ability and finances and just all of the things, age that may distinguish us one from the other, that when we meditate together, we let go of those for the period of our meditation, and we connect with our shared humanity. We let go of what he calls our former names and clans, and we let go of them to realize what is simultaneously true, and that is our non-separation, our interdependence and interconnection. And to be able to hold both of these truths in the same heart, that is one of the astonishing and amazing qualities of this practice. And then he says, just as all the rivers of the world pour into the ocean and rains pour from the sky, the ocean still stays pretty much the same. You don't see after the monsoon, there may be some flooding, but the ocean doesn't totally overrun the land. It stays in some way without swelling or diminishing is the word. And in the same way, our practice, we can say that awareness itself, it doesn't swell or diminish. Awareness is always present. It's always the same. Our mindfulness of it, our attention to it, our opening our hearts, that changes. And that's why we aspire to keep our hearts steady as possible within all the ups and downs and changes of our life and our world. And this is a simple one. Just as all the ocean has the taste of salt, so all the teachings have the taste of liberation or freedom. And then number 7, just as the ocean has treasures of many different kinds, the teachings, we have so many treasures, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the truths of life, these qualities of awakening, the 5 strengths of spiritual practice, all the Buddhist lists. and all the learnings that are available to us to grow our capacity for love and for awareness and for loving awareness together. Um, just as there are treasures in the ocean, there are treasures to be discovered in our own hearts when we look deeply. And then the last one is, just as the ocean is the abode of mighty beings like whales and so forth. He lists lots of beings. In the same way, our practice leads us to become mighty beings such as these, that we can become, I mean, he uses very archaic language, but basically we understand that through our practice, we can become stronger and wiser and mightier in our ability to be a blessing in the world. And then after the Buddha gave this teaching, he said, rain soddens that which is covered. I love this one. Rain soddens that which is covered, but doesn't sodden that which is open. So open up what's covered up so it won't get soddened by the rain. And I love this too, because it's really saying, look at the parts of yourself that may be quite covered and they can get, kind of heavy. That word sodden, it's a little damp and heavy. I think of cardboard that's been left out in the rain. And so the real longing, the call from this great teacher of the ages is open up whatever is covered up in ourselves. Please do that. And we come together to practice in this way, to listen to teachings, to meditate and look deeply, and then share what we're seeing, so that we can open up what previously was hidden to us, that we can see what may have been covered, and that we can be honest about that. And in the very vulnerability of opening up in this way, we discover something alive and something loving. We naturally respond to each other when we open up in that way. So this is what I want to share with you this morning. And I really do feel that at this time in our world, I want to quote Michelle Alexander, who wrote The New Jim Crow. And she said, our only hope for our collective liberation is a politics of deep solidarity rooted in love. In recent days, weeks, we've seen what it looks like when people of all races, ethnicities, genders, and backgrounds rise up together, standing in solidarity for justice, protesting, marching, singing together, even as SWAT teams and tanks roll in. We've seen our faces in another American mirror, a reflection of the best of who we are and what we can become. I've glimpsed in a foggy mirror scenes of a beautiful, courageous nation struggling to be born. So may we uncover whatever, may we shine the light of loving awareness on whatever gets in the way of this new, beautiful, courageous nation, community, family, city that is struggling to be born. Because as I said in the talk on my birthday, what we go through as individuals is what we go through in groups. And what we go through in groups and organizations is what we go through in communities and nations. So it's really important. So this is our time to hear each other, for me to have some dialogue with you. We haven't done breakout groups in our Zoom meetings. I don't know about you, I have felt a little bit fatigued of breakout groups in Zoom meetings, but just personally, but maybe it's something that would be useful for us to consider Not this week because we didn't plan it, but we could start with that next week. And, you know, you can say what you think about that if you have an opinion in the chat. And our moderators, who are, as always, Akemi, our volunteer coordinator, and Ran is also going to moderate our conversation today. So welcome to doing that, Ran, and thank you for training him, Kemi. And let's have some conversation. I just want to encourage you to, as much as you can, you know, as much as you feel safe to do, don't go past what you feel safe to do, to let yourself be vulnerable and to share from the heart, so that will encourage other people too, to uncover more of what's perhaps been hidden. So thank you, everybody.
So I want to ask everyone who often shares to kind of hold back a little, and in case you usually don't, feel free to come forward. We want to create space for a lot of people to communicate. Usually we run out of time, so please be succinct in your comments and questions. Finally, it's easiest for me if you click the participants button and then raise your hand from that column, which will show up on the right, or just wave your hand on the camera. Okay.
Wait, Ran,
Yeah.
I just clicked on participants and I don't see the raised hand.
If you hit participants.
I just did. I'm just pretending to be somebody who.
Trudy, it's because you're a co-host, so you don't have.
Oh, okay. I was gonna just demonstrate. Okay.
Right. Yeah, the hands don't show up on the co-host.
Okay. I was gonna say I usually can do it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Do
Terry,
we have a raised hand?
What?
Do we have a raised hand yet?
Yeah, I got one here. It's
okay.
Tara. Go ahead, Tara.
Can you unmute? Yeah.
I undid it. She has, yeah.
No, she's unmuted. Hi, Tara.
Hi. I really appreciate what you said the last part of your talk about trying to open up and uncover what's hidden. And I was wondering how we can use the practices to do that, just as a little assist. So is there some guidance you can give on that?
Yeah, but let me ask you first what makes you ask that question?
I feel like I'm a little closed and I'd like to open up, but it's kind of hard because I feel like there's some resistance and I've been working on it, but I'm still not where I'd like to be. And so I like the idea of maybe using the practice to help support that process. And I was just wondering if you can give some insight on that.
Thank you. That helps me understand better. First of all, just sitting and meditating. If you are able to just be with yourself and not apply the instructions too rigidly to yourself, like, you know, oh my gosh, my mind has wandered, boom, I have to rigidly, you know, jump back to the breath and focus on the breath. And instead, notice where the mind is wandering. Notice what your mind likes to think about. What are the top 10 tunes, you know, the hits that keep coming back? And notice patterns of where you resist and where you turn away. Like I notice in my sitting, there's certain thoughts I'll instantly turn away from because they're unpleasant. And so it's very easy to come back to whatever the subject of, you know, my meditation is. And I'll notice there are other kinds of thoughts that I just love to entertain because I think they're interesting or because it's a pleasant fantasy, right? So just very simply noticing sort of the movements of your mind and heart and beginning to see the patterns there. That's one way to open up to what may have been hidden. And it also it's a good, painful but good subject is also everything to do with the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that are coming up in every organization right now. Because there are thoughts and feelings that we might have kept hidden, even from ourselves, and that we notice are rising in the face of the upheaval and intensity of what's going on. Do you see what I mean? So that's another way to use the practice. It might not seem like it's using the practice, but being mindful and aware and having the honesty to admit what you see in yourself, and the tenderness or the loving kindness, not to, go into various forms of blaming and shaming or guilt, but just to stay with, of course this is coming up. This is the world I've grown up in. This is the conditioning, you know what I mean? Of course. So those are some ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Okay, Emily.
Okay, hi. So I'm wondering if I could get some feedback about, I've been working with 3 characteristics, including the characteristic of impermanence, which is in all formations, and wondering how that sits in contrast to this perception, at least on my part, that injustice seems to have a great deal of permanence to it. Has been going on for so long. So I'm trying to get some insight into that, if you could help.
I don't know. We'll see if I can help. We'll see. No,
Yeah, thank you.
say injustice has been going on for a long time. Yes, when we look at a global, but if you look at manifestations of injustice have arisen and fallen away and arisen and fallen away. And yes, they keep coming back. And so to me, the real question is, why does it keep coming back? How does it keep coming back? Even when there have been movements, social movements over the millennia, movements toward equality, revolutions, various forms of government and living together that have been tried. And so to me, the real question is, and I don't know if this resonates for you or not, but is how can we begin to address the root causes of injustice, which are greed, hatred, and ignorance. The greed that people seem to have. I mean, we have a new development consultant until the end of July, a great blessing for InsightLA. And so there have been conversations about giving and who gives and who doesn't. And it's been difficult for me to understand how people who have so many resources, they might not even be able to use them in one lifetime, wouldn't naturally want to share them and redistribute some of that accumulated wealth. But what prevents that from happening? You see, it's greed. What prevents harms from being overlooked or ignored or shoved outside of awareness? That's ignorance. And what causes the kind of discrimination and really, it's hatred. When I worked in the refugee camps in just about 45 minutes from Darfur in South Sudan, what I learned, I could have learned it earlier, but I really got a crash course in remembering it, was the people in the camps were darker Black than the people who had attacked them, who were also Black Africans, but somewhat maybe more Arab strain of blood that made their skin a little bit lighter in general. What causes that kind of insane hatred that you would want to burn people up in their villages because their skin is darker? Do you see, this is more how I understand it, that these 3 marks of existence are antidotes to getting caught in what are called the 3 poisons. These are strategies of disconnecting from the truth of life and experience through hating or being greedy or ignoring what's there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So I think this is where I get hopeful about Because sometimes I wonder, what have I done in my life? You know, I meditated and shared how to meditate with people and shared teachings that I love. But then when I think, oh my gosh, but if people really took these to heart, it would be totally game changing. Do you see what I mean? We would be redistributing wealth. We would be loving our sisters and brothers and gender fluid beings. We would be, you know, we would not be turning away from and ignoring the things that are covered up, and because they're painful. It's usually because they're painful that they get covered up. You know, we would be having more tenderness and understanding of all that. So why is it impermanent? Because our awakening is impermanent, just like our ignorance. You know what I mean? We have to keep working to understand and grow in love and understanding. So, but I love your question and thank you for your practice. Yeah.
Okay, Trudy, we have a chat question I'll read to you from Chris Wood. Well, it says Chris Wood, but then it says, hi, Trudy, this is Lisa. We're feeling a little confused by the first part of the teaching. It seems like throwing someone out of the group is antithetical to Buddhist teaching of compassion and love. Can you help clarify?
Yeah, I can. You know, these teachings are very condensed. And so I think you would have to understand that maybe this is a problem person in the community. And maybe the community has tried all kinds of things to work with that person. And maybe that person simply doesn't share the values at all. There are times, even in our community at InsightLA, when somebody has been destructive or, you know, really not able to get along, and it doesn't fit for that person to be there. And I realized that it sounds like, you know, just throwing them out of your heart. I don't ever throw anybody out of my heart. I learned that from Ram Dass's teachings, from the teachings of his teacher long ago, to try not to do that. But that doesn't mean that they belong in my life. And to me, this is also a question that comes up when people have suffered severe childhood abuse or any kind of abuse, whether it's sexual abuse or violence or whatever kind of harm. And then the question arises, is it okay for me not to see this person because they are continuing their harm? And yes, it's okay to set a limit and to have a boundary. Is that helpful? You can answer in the chat because I can see the chat too.
Okay, well, I guess we'll move to the next one, Trudy.
Well, actually, no, I see there's more in the chat here.
I don't see it showing up.
James said he felt called out by that teaching. That teaching was not aimed at you, James, or anybody here. And I think that it's really important. I want to just address this idea that it's out of character for the Buddha to, you know, be glad that somebody left. And I think when you're a leader, you have to understand that you're responsible to the whole community and you're responsible to the whole group. And if there's somebody who is creating harm and being disruptive, sometimes that person, I mean, the Buddha has a whole teaching on when harsh speech is appropriate. So it's not that it's all gentle and all loving. Sometimes the love is tough love, and the gentleness has to be firm in order to protect the larger group. So that's how I understood it. That person did not naturally go their own way. They were asked to leave in the sutra. That's what it says. Look, these sutras were written down hundreds of years after the fact. Who knows what really happened? But we're using them just for our own purposes here. And so I think it's good not to get hung up on too literal of a meaning, especially given, like I said, the actual historical record isn't, we don't have that nobody had body cams or videos on their phones back then. Okay, so there's raised hands and there's Juliana's question.
Ronnie's been waiting a while. Do you want to?
Okay. Sure.
Hi. I have a question, but I just want to make a comment about the last person. I looked at it like the person who was asked to leave was probably not ready for the Buddhist teachings and possibly holding the group back. And it didn't have anything to do with anything in a mean-spirited way. It was just sometimes, you're just not ready to, you're not open enough, you're not ready to accept something, and you do end up holding the people that are ready back if you're in with their group. So that's kind of where I was thinking, if the Buddha was going. But, that's just my thinking,
But don't dismiss your thinking. That's your understanding. And
yeah.
it's a skillful understanding. It's compassionate. There are times when organizations are not ready for their consultants. Or,
right.
I mean, it's just,
right.
It's natural. It happens. And it's not a sign that being will never be ready.
No, I mean, it's like each one of us, I mean, we have to be ready enough to accept any kind of a teaching. And if not, we won't understand it. So it's just about, that's how my understanding. But my question is this, Trudy. I've asked this question before to another teacher, and she gave me an answer that was somewhat satisfying, but not, all the way. And I wondered if you could give me a little more understanding and insight into this. One of the main teachings of the Buddha is that there is suffering. The truth, one of his main truths is that there is suffering. Yet in a lot of meditations, it's the meditations about alleviating suffering. So how can we work to alleviating suffering if one of the truths is that there is suffering? I've never understood that.
Can I ask where this question is arising, in you? How, what is making
it just seems hypocritical. It seems hypocritical to me. That whenever I do any kind of meditation with the teacher or on my own, and it's about, may your suffering cease or may your suffering stop. And then my mind always goes back to, but there is suffering. I mean, how can...
Okay, I get it. Yeah, thank you. That's clear.
Okay.
Because I think what may be forgotten here is that the Buddha taught that there is suffering and there's a way out of suffering. And so the first sort of Buddhist fact of life, called the first noble truth in the teaching, is yes, there's suffering, and you have to be willing to not be in denial and to acknowledge your vulnerability and your suffering in order to do something about it. That's just practical, right? The Buddha was actually a very practical psychologist. And then, the next step is looking at, well, what's causing the suffering? And then the third step is seeing, okay, if I understand the cause, then I can work with that cause to stop it.
I see what you're saying.
And the fourth step is the Eightfold Path, all the steps of how do we live in such a way to reduce suffering to ourselves and our impact, on the planet and each other and so forth. And then how do we cultivate the steadiness of mind and ability to have a wise view of life, the things that will actually allow us to live in a much happier and more fulfilled way.
Okay. So you're saying that there is a way, or there are ways of getting out of certain types of suffering.
Of course. Why? I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Okay.
I devoted my life to just growing into suffering.
And that's what I was hoping. But this other teacher,
grim, depressing.
The other teacher gave me a different type of an answer, and
everybody has their own understanding.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a question in the chat, Trudy, if you want to read it, or I can read it for you, from Juliana.
Oh yeah, okay.
Read it.
Okay, so the question in the chat is, could I talk about how to direct our practice to deepen faith or steadiness, and also how to know when to stick with our particular practice as it is, or when a shift is indicated to promote growth or deepening? Yeah, that's a great question, because we're taught to really stay with a practice and not jump around, you know, from practice to practice. When we get bored with one, oh, I'll try this one, or oh God, Zen is too strict, I'm going to try Tibetan Buddhist practice. Oh, I love the visualizations, but I don't want to do actually the other stuff. So why don't I try insight meditation? Obviously, that isn't a wise approach to deepening our practice. The analogy I always use is at the beach, since we're in the ocean today. If you dig down in the sand, you know, if you dig down deep, you'll get water. You'll come to water, especially closer to the water's edge. And but if you keep digging a little bit and then move over and dig a little bit and then move over and dig a little bit in another spot, right, you're not going to find the water. So you understand that, Juliana. And so the question is, how do you have the discernment to shift your practice in order to deepen your faith and stay steady in it? And I think that when you begin to have the impulse or the longing to do that, just look and say, ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is there something going on in my practice now that I don't really want to face? And I feel like if I move or shift my practice, I won't have to. Or is it because I can genuinely see, actually, I'm very, very clear, but I could use a little more tenderness or kindness or softening in that clarity. So I think I'm going to do some loving kindness practice for a while. That's a very simple example. And you can trust yourself. That's the other thing. It's so hard to do, but you can actually trust yourself, because if something keeps coming up over and over again, it needs attention, versus just an idea that might appear like a whim. You know, these are I know it's kind of a simplistic answer, but if you want to tell me more about where your question's coming from, I might be able to be more helpful in responding. You don't have to, but you might want to.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. I think in terms of what, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be shouting at you either.
No, your voice is very soft and nice.
So my practice, like the bedrock of my practice since September, has been an hour and a half of loving kindness meditation for a benefactor. And I have felt so steady with that. Like it has changed my life in a way I couldn't foresee. And I think I feel less steady now. And I don't know if that's just because of the world, or if it's a sign that I need to make a shift. So that's sort of where the question originates.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing this practice for a year and a half, and any practice, honestly, any practice that you do sincerely, wholeheartedly, you could just do it for the rest of your life and it will bring tremendous benefits. At the same time, it may be that you've done this practice for a year and a half and you're ready for something else. You're ready for maybe an expansion into some new area of the practice. And, you know, the best way to find out would be to try it out, you know, to shift and see what happens. And if you've been doing a pretty intensive, it sounds like, loving kindness practice for a year and a half, maybe you want to experiment and shift to an awareness practice to complement that and see what happens. Or maybe you want to shift to radiating loving kindness to all beings instead of to this particular being. You know, you could move on to different categories in the loving kindness practice too, because that's been very beneficial for you. But I think it's fine to explore and experiment, especially when I know you've been very steady with a practice for a long time. And there is more upheaval. That it's not that there's more upheaval. Upheaval has always been going on. Black people have been getting killed all along. And, you know, it's been going on. It's just that now it's in everybody's face, and it seems that there's a chance to change this. And so this is creating, along with the pandemic, which is changing everything about how we're living. You know, it's like the ground that seemed very stable and steady underneath us, at least us as white people, is shifting. And it's like a kind of, it's an earthquake, really. And so maybe a practice does, you know, there does need to be a shift in it. I just want to encourage you to explore and to feel free to experiment, because, well, as I said, because you have been steady. You don't have to prove anything about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have a question from James Bites. James, do you want to speak it, or do you want me to read it to Trudy? James?
Reading it's fine.
Okay. Okay. James wrote, Trudy, could you possibly say one more time that one sentence during the teaching on looking inside ourselves, and that we will find loving awareness in that?
Yes. Yes, I will. I'm sorry, I was just looking at the rest of the chat. Yes.
Hi.
I'm about to answer, James. I just was looking at what you said earlier about the desire for power. And I want to just say about that, I see that as very linked to greed. It's a form of greed, for sure. And thank you for naming that particular form of greed. So what I was saying that I think you might be interested in, I'm not sure, was it when I was talking about vulnerability and being vulnerable?
Right towards the end of the lesson. It was one of the final statements you made, and it was like so good that I wanted to write it down, but I couldn't capture it.
I guess the best news for both of us is that it's been recorded, because I don't remember what I said in the moment. I don't remember, but I do remember talking about that when we let ourselves become vulnerable, it's always vulnerable because of something painful or that we consider bad news, right? Our shame, our whatever it might be, our unworthiness, our broken heart, our whatever it might be. And because it's something bad, we don't want to deal with it, basically, and we want to get away from it, and we want to use the practice to make it go away, because it feels terrible to us. And I was saying that if we have the courage to actually, you know, go into it and let ourselves just like be vulnerable, even if it makes us kind of shivery and uncertain, that there's an aliveness in that. We come alive. And then that begins to bring love,
Relief.
Love of life, relief, love of life.
Anytime we feel vulnerable, or I mean, anytime we have something that we're kind of avoiding, we can be vulnerable with that, and that will be the key that we've been looking for.
I think so. I really do. And also, I just want to make clear, because I saw something else appear in the chat, that power isn't bad. If we say power is bad, then the only people who are going to want power are bad people. And that's not good for our world. Power is power. It can be used for good or for bad. I remember before Jack and I were together, I brought a friend to hear him speak. And he was particularly, well, he's always eloquent, but he was particularly eloquent that night. And the friend, Mike Birch, said, I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he said, wow, I'm glad this guy is working for the good. And you know, that's when you see somebody very charismatic and you really want them to be using that power, because that's a personal power, for the good.
There's a capacity for light or dark. It's a large capacity.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So thank you, everybody. This is perfect timing. Let's just sit together
I
for.
have a couple announcements real quick.
Oh, okay, Cami, then we'll sit together.
Yeah, so first, Maxine Shapiro's amazing improv workshop, Playful Presence. Maxine is here. We're having one this Thursday from 5 to 7:30. If you've never done improv, it's an amazing practice for mindfulness practitioners, for like anxiety and facing uncertainty and change and all that. We also have our POC, People of Color Sangha, and our Mindful of Whiteness practice groups every Friday. So I put the links to all of those in the chat. Thanks. That's all.
Okay, so let's sit together just for a minute. So as we come to the end of our time together this morning, we have a tradition of offering whatever has been beneficial, helpful, good for us in the teachings and the sharing and the meditation together. That we express our appreciation and gratitude for the blessing, the luxury, the privilege of being able to do this together. That we express it by offering just freely from our hearts. This is an imaginative offering of the goodness of our practice to all beings everywhere without exception. May the goodness of our practice help us grow into the beautiful, courageous beings, the beautiful, courageous communities, the beautiful, courageous nation and world that is wanting to be born. So unmute everybody so we can say thank you and goodbye until next week, and happy Father's Day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great day.
Trudy.
Happy Father's Day to all the
Thank you,
fathers,
Trudy.
all the men, all the males.
Thanks, Trudy. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Session.
They're wonderful.
Thank you.
Love you all.
Always look
Love you
forward to it.
all.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, everyone.
Hi, Dee.
Thanks, Trudy.
Hi, Dee Dee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trudy.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Dee Dee. Thank you, Trudy.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Trudy.
Thank you.
Mm.